Alright, very good. Welcome to Paco3D.art. So in this tutorial session, we are going to step into the introduction of Zbrush. This is going to be a very simple, easy, getting to understand a little bit the UI of Zbrush, and also understanding where the buttons, what is also the logic of the software, on how you do anything. The main thing you need to consider if you've never used Zbrush before is that at first it can have a very steep learning curve at the beginning. However, confront that feeling because it is a wonderful software, and the more you use it, the more it's going to become a second nature, and you're going to love it. However, the thing with Zbrush as well is that you do need to customize the UI to make the most out of it. And this is because the UI is broken into different parts. So just to go in a little bit more detail, this video is about the UI. It's about learning what are the palettes. It's also about learning, what are the most common palettes that you should pay attention to. But there's a lot of them, right? So there's something like 20 palettes, I believe, or something like that. There's heaps, and each palette has got different things. But also for the default UI, there is a few buttons around, and I give you a little bit on an overview of the map of the UI. So this is usually how you start, right? So you will start with this box. I'm gonna move. Do you not mean to do that? Why are you moving that? All right. So I'm gonna start with, and I've cut the top part, so it's a little bit easier for you to see all the buttons and everything. And usually you start with this big thing here in the middle, which is essentially, it's essentially a library on being able to display anything. So in order to remove it, you can just press down the coma button, and that's usually the shortcut to reduce it or to remove it if you don't want that. So that's the first thing we should do. It's quite useful because usually when it starts, sometimes you can go to your recent projects. So you can go in here, recent projects. So for example, here I've got a rock that I've been sculpting, or one of the characters. But you can also go inside over here, brushes and materials and stuff like that. Yeah, but I'm gonna close it with the period. And I wanted to explain a little bit first the logic of the palettes. So usually in most Windows programs, most software applications, you usually have things like file, or things like edit, or things like Windows as well, which we don't have here. But here instead it is done alphabetically. So you got A, B, C, D. So it is not essentially in a logical order. It's more done in an alphabetical order. So that's the first thing that it can throw off a lot of people. Now, when it comes to each of these buttons here, these are palettes. So for example, the tool palette that we have here on our right, that's a tool palette. And so when you open this, the way that they work with these palettes, say that I click one of these buttons here, I'm gonna start with brush. For example, brush is a very common palette. If you click on this in here, you have this little icon here, and you can also, like, instead of clicking this all the time to open all these different things, you can drag that icon there, and you can move that to, like, if you click it once, it's going to teleport, but you can also click on that and you can move it to another way. And this is where now I can close that. And now that's going to give me the two palettes, and it opens there. So our palette is almost like, it is like a window button, but then you open that and it's got a lot more buttons inside of it. So that's how you have to think about it when it comes to palettes. Now that we've covered the logic of the palettes within Zbrush, and I will get started very soon at actually sculpting something, but we don't understand a little bit the logic on the palettes where things are and where are the buttons. It can be a little bit distracting, but uh, I'm just gonna go and open, let's say, the 5 most common palettes, right? So we got anything that has to do with the brushes. This is a very common palette. So this is usually where you can go in here and change some of the modifiers or some of the settings with the palettes. So that's very important. But I would say the most important one, like if I had to choose one palette only to have open at all times, would be the tool palette. And I will show you like it's very simple if you do not start up properly. It's very simple at first. But once you start sculpting in 3D, once you start using a polymesh 3D, which I will explain in a minute what that is, then you have menus over menus within the tool subset alone, and you got lots and lots of buttons, and that's essentially the main area where you can modify your topology and you can alter your topology within the tool palette. Honorable mentions of other palettes. You have things like draw. It's a very common one. This is to change the camera setting and to change some of the settings, like okay, the strength of the brush or the draw side. Another strong contestant is color. So if you want to change anything with color. Document is essentially if you want to change the window in here, which I will explain in the future. If you want to change the canvas, this is where you do it. You do it inside of document. So you go document in here, and then you have got the settings in here where you can change the resolution of the document. And I will go through this in detail. When you want to load or unload documents, it is inside of file. So if you go file, you can open a document in here. However, the way that the file system works inside of Zbrush, you either can load up the individual models, and they are called tools, so you can save it as a tool, or you can save the library with all the settings and the library with all the tools that's been working within an individual project. Some people have a preference to save the individual tools because it takes a lot less space, and then it's just for that individual asset. Or people prefer to save it as tools or as projects. Now, I prefer projects because sometimes I will have different objects as saved as different tools within that library, and or could have, for example, a different versions of the same model, and sometimes I like for everything to be together. It takes a lot more memory, but the other things that are quite useful is that you got set up the brushes or the alphas, or if you've got like uh, background images that you're using as references, it's all safe within the same project structure. But yeah, it's going to take a lot more memory, so it really is up to you on how you feel comfortable. And in most places that I've seen, they like to teach that you save it as a tool, and that's the individual object as a tool. Um, Now, so I think that I will go through a lot of these. Like you got stroke, you got transform. Those are two main ones as well. To learn textures, to do anything with textures, obviously. Materials has got to do anything with materials, but you know, light is to change the lighting. But I will go through all of these in detail. But I think the main 5 ones that you should try to explore and look at all the settings with time is the tool one, of course. That's the most important one. Then the second most important one to do with saving and files and stuff like that is file and also preferences. So preferences is if you want to change anything within Zbrush. But then brush, again, it's like if you want to change the brushes, and document if you want to change the document. So I think that is the 5 most important ones that I'd recommend that you go through in detail. And then after that, you have stroke and transform, and then you have you know, alpha and color. So it really, there's a lot of options within there, But let's get started with going through some of the icons that are quite important. If you, you know what, I'm gonna do this in a more organic manner. I'm gonna stop this video as we covered the more or less the UI with some of the elements. But this in here, this is where you have the main window, where this is where you do the sculpt of the software. Here, this is where you can change the materials. Here, this is where you can change the brushes. So if you press on that, that will change the brushes. This is how you can change the behavior on how the strokes work. So this is the stroke functionality. Here, this is to change the shape of the brush. So it can be a square or a circle, or it can be an image. So this is the alpha of the brushes, and this is to apply a texture, right? And what's really cool about this UI, all of these buttons, you can customize this, you can change this very, very easily. This button here, this is for isolate. So if you just want to see any specific subtool, you press that button. This one here, which is grayed out at the moment, this is for seeing the wireframe. Okay. When it comes to all of this, this is for camera movement. And the main one that is quite important is frame. And you can also press F for this one to frame on the actual thing. Now just pay attention that these ones up here, they are not camera. So these are not camera, these are document based, yeah? And the document based buttons is like it's the actual canvas, and I recommend that you always work with the actual, because actually if you don't have the canvas to one pixels, it's gonna look very distorted. Not distorted, it's gonna look very noisy with the pixels. It's not showing the actual representation to one with the pixels. I'm gonna clear the canvas with my notes for a second and talk about this top images here. So this is where you have the home page. This is usually where if you start your Zbrush and you don't have the setting disabled, it will start up the welcome presentation. Lightbox is the one that I was talking about earlier. So if you don't press comma, then you can press that button to take it off. Live Boolean is to combine objects, and Boolean works surprisingly really well in Zbrush. So I recommend that you play with that in the future, make a note of it. However, this button here, your edit button, this is the first button that we're going to talk about in the next video. And then you have your move, scale, and rotate. So if you press WER, you can activate all of those as well, very similar to Zbrush. This one here is T, and that's very important. In a second, we'll talk about that. This is your move gizmos, and you have two different types of like gizmos inside of Zbrush. So you got the gizmos that is like the traditional method, and then you have the more modern method. This is like more similar to Maya. Professionals usually like to use the classical one, and for many reasons, and I'll show you why, because it behaves more like an interactive bone that has an origin and it has a point of rotation, and then you can rotate it in very interesting ways. Going on, this is all the different settings on changing the functionality of the brush. So this is where you have, okay, so this is the alpha. Here, this is material and color. So this is matte and color. Then you have only color, and then you have only material, and then you have add and sub. So this is if you're going up or if you're going down whenever you paint with a brush. Okay, so if you press add, it's like adding, and if you press sub, it's reducing. Okay, and this has to do, like, if you got the brush with the inner and the outer, this is essentially like the softness with the brush. So I will explain with that in a second. Draw size is how big the brush is. Okay, and yeah, don't worry too much if this is a bit overwhelming, because there is a lot that I will cover very gradually. I just wanted to give everybody a bit of a map, a bit of an understanding where everything is, how the palettes do work. And then now we're gonna start with the first, sculpting the first ball and how to put these things together. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.